Locked On Podcast Network and BetOnline present NFL Key Predictions. The local team experts of Locked On NFL give you the inside knowledge on the biggest games of the week and betting advice from the field's leading experts. You are Locked On NFL Key Predictions.
Hey everyone, and welcome into NFL Key Predictions. I'm Jordan Black. With the 5 games we have on tap in Week 16, 4 of them could result in current playoff teams getting bounced out. We are now entering do or die territory in the NFL, building to epic finishes across the league. We kick things off in Kansas City, where the visiting Seattle Seahawks may see the bloom fall off the rose. Pro Bowler Geno Smith continues his resurgent season, but Seattle has lost 4 out of their past 5 games and could be 1 loss away from falling out of the playoff picture. It should come as no surprise that standing in the Seahawks' way will be one of the most consistent teams in the NFL. At 11-3 and vying for the number 1 seed, it's Kansas City, who will need to keep an eye on the defensive side of the ball, where they've given up at least 24 points to the Texans and Broncos in their previous 2 wins. Corbin Smith from Locked On Seahawks joins Ryan Tracy and Chris Clark from Locked On Chiefs to preview this contest for us.
Going to flip it over to you, Chris. Looking at the Chiefs in this game, what are some keys to getting the victory, especially when you consider that the weather is potentially going to wreak havoc in this football game as well?
I think one of the biggest keys to victory is holding on to the ball. Kansas City, I think it's 9 straight games now where they've turned all over the ball once. They cannot continue to do that. They have to get over turning the ball over. And obviously you want to win the turnover battle. The easiest way to win the turnover battle is to not turn the ball over at all, because this team is also very bad about taking the ball away from other teams. So my biggest key to victory for Kansas City: don't turn the ball over. Don't give Seattle an opportunity to score a touchdown or put points on the board on a short field or at all, period. Do whatever you can, use field position and try to keep them, make it long drives. The Chiefs defense usually is pretty good when they're having to go the length of the field. They can get a stop at some point. So to me, the biggest key is don't turn the ball over. The second biggest key is get Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon running, and maybe even Ronald Jones in this game. Maybe you use a 3-headed monster and you give each of them 10 or 15 carries, because it's going to be cold. And it is going to be something where the offensive line is going to want to run block, and they have the ability to do that. I think that this is a game where maybe if they run the ball, 30 times, they're going to be in a position where they should be able to win it.
Yeah, that's something that I worry about with every opponent, because basically, and I've been making this joke for several weeks, but it's not really a joke. I mean, if you have a pulse and you're in the backfield, you can probably run for 100 yards against the Seahawks defense. And that's how poor they've been playing the last few weeks. But they did step up against San Francisco, who's got one of the best rushing offenses in the NFL. So maybe that was a turning point. Pete Carroll seems to think that it was, even though they lost that game. There were a lot of positive developments in that game that he feels are going to carry over to these last 3 games, get this team back over the hump. You mentioned the turnovers. This really is, to me, going to be the key in this game, because when Seattle was off to a 6-3 start, part of the reason they were able to do it is because they were creating a ton of turnovers. And that has regressed back to the mean here over the last 4 or 5 games. They haven't been able to create those same amount of turnovers. If they can find a way, as I mentioned earlier, to get a little bit of pressure on Patrick Mahomes, maybe force him into an ill-advised throw, get one of the running backs to fumble. The Chiefs have had some issues with that as of late. If you can get the ball on the turf and get some short field, Geno Smith has made opponents pay when the Seahawks have been able to do that this year. And they just haven't been able to make those stops on defense the last 4 or 5 games. So I think that's going to be big. And on the offensive side of the ball, the Chiefs statistically have been solid against the run. But when you're dealing with negative temperatures, you have got to find a way to run the football. And this team has not been able to do it for over a month. I think Ken Walker III is going to be able to play. I think they're going to be cautious with him during the practice week, make sure that he's ready to go. But he's going to play in this game. And they're going to have DJ Dallas potentially back. Travis Homer's still there. And they can mix in a few of their receivers in the run game as well. They've got enough people to get the job done with the skilled positions. But this is me calling out Shane Waldron. Get under center more. I don't know why they have gotten away from that the last couple games, but they were in shotgun more than 80% of their plays against the 49ers. And I felt like that was waving a white flag. Like, why are you not running the football more under center? And they had 20 yards on 2 carries when they ran the ball under center. Very small sample size, but they actually had success doing it. And then they just didn't do it anymore. And so I feel like that is a key in this game, especially with the aggressive, penetrating style of these defensive linemen for the Chiefs. Get under center, run the football, try to control the line of scrimmage a little bit, something you haven't been able to do. That takes some pressure off Geno Smith. It takes some pressure off that pass rush so they can't pin their ears back as much. And I think that is going to be crucial in this game. So there's been other games I've said this, but more so in this matchup than any other with the elements who you're playing against. You've got to have a balanced offense, and you got to be able to run the football. And if it's not working early, don't give up on it. Don't abandon it and just throw everything on Geno Smith. He's been a great quarterback this year, but you can't ask him to be 95% of the offense, especially against a team like the Chiefs. They've got to be able to run the football. If they can't do that, this game could get ugly. If they can run the ball, Seattle might be able to pull an upset. It's that big of a deal, in my opinion.
Well, and what you're talking about is you're in a situation where I just looked at the weather because I was curious. We've been talking about this whole show, and I know I've seen negative degrees. Right now, I'm seeing it's supposed to be 5 around kickoff, 5 degrees, but the feel is -11. So may as well be negative temperatures the entire game. And in that scenario, you're absolutely right. You have to be able to run the ball because it is going to be a lot harder to catch the ball. It's going to be a lot harder to throw the ball. It's all going to be harder to move the ball. I do not expect this to be a high-scoring game. Kansas City and Seattle a couple of weeks ago, without the weather, maybe it would have been a high-scoring game in my mind. But with the way the weather is going to stack out, I could see this being a ground and pound on both sides because that's really what you're going to need to be able to do. Like I said, it's going to be a lot harder to throw and a lot harder to catch when it is -10 degrees. That is the feel for what the offensive players are going to be out there dealing with. Corbin, what is your guess in this game? How are you expecting it to play out?
So I'll dish out my score prediction on our Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks, but I'm just going to say this right now. I'm not going to say the Seahawks can't win this game because I've seen them beat some good teams, and I know if their run game is there that they are a formidable football team. But it's been so long since their run deep has been they haven't played a quarterback of Patrick Mahomes' caliber in quite some time either. They're playing in negative weather. I look at this, all the different scenarios that are at play here, and I just find it hard to believe that this Seahawks team, especially the way they've been reeling as of late, I can't see this being a get-right game in any way, shape, or form. So I think they're going to find a way to make it somewhat competitive because Pete Carroll is not going to let them roll over, and I don't think the players are going to roll over. But I just think the Chiefs are the more talented team, and there's a lot of things working in their favor going into this football game. They're playing for the number 1 seed. They're motivated. I can't see the Seahawks winning this football game.
You know, I look at this game, and I'll give my score prediction with Ryan on Friday's show. And I will say this, and I know anybody that's listened to me on Locked On Chiefs, you've heard me say this, you've heard Ryan say this. And this isn't anything against Seattle because I think Seattle's a better team than a lot of people ever have given them credit for. But Kansas City has a tendency lately to play down to the level of competition. They had to go to overtime to beat the Houston Texans. That's a problem. You have to get to a point where you put bad teams away and you play to your level of competition at all times. My biggest fear in this game is Kansas City going out and beating themselves. And what I mean by that is turning the ball over. If they turn the ball over 2 or 3 times, this is easily a game that they can lose. And it's not trying to give any shade to Seattle at all. I think Seattle is more than capable of beating them, especially if Kansas City gives them help. And that's my biggest fear in this game. I still think Kansas City wins. But that's going to be what I'm going to be watching for is how this team responds and how they attack, knowing that they still have an opportunity to get the number 1 seed in the AFC.
This might be an opponent that actually matches up well against the Seahawks from a Seahawks perspective, though, because their pass defense has actually been pretty solid this year with that secondary that they've got. Now, Kansas City can run the ball. That's going to be the key. If Kansas City's able to run the football, as you mentioned, that's really going to put a lot of pressure on this defense. And then the secondary is going to be in trouble. Play action off of the run game. So, yeah, there's concerns there. I can see what your point is, though, as well. I watched that entire Chiefs-Texans game with the Seahawks not playing this weekend, and I thought, man, they look human today. They look ordinary. Now, will they look like that in this game? Who knows? But if they play like that again, Seattle can win this football game because Seattle is a much better team than the Houston Texans, and they're going to scrap, they're going to fight. But if the Chiefs play like they're capable of, I still think this is a game that leans heavily towards Kansas City at home with the elements, the injuries Seattle's dealing with. It's just hard for me to envision this being a get-right game for them.
Yeah, and definitely at home, I think helps Kansas City in this weather or in this game because I think that the crowd is going to be into it. Although with the temperatures going to be what they're going to be, we'll see how much of a factor the crowd is in this game. I would expect they're still going to have quite the stadium there.
From Locked On Bets, here's Lee Sterling.
This is Lee Sterling from Locked On Bets and Paramount Sports with your BetOnline prediction for the game between the Kansas City Chiefs at home laying 10 points versus the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Kansas City quarterback Patrick Mahomes has been incredible this year. In fact, number one in the NFL in passing yards with 4,496 yards, and he also leads the NFL with 35 passing touchdowns. In fact, they have won a lot of games, 10-3 straight up since week 2, but an awful spread record, 2-10-1 against the spread, including 0-5-1 against the spread when laying more than 7 points. And the line is 10 points in this game. I think Seattle, still in the playoff hunt, has the running attack with Kenneth Walker to stay in this game and play some keep away here. Also, Seahawks, 3 extra days to prepare for this game. I think Kansas City will win the game, something like 34-30, but will not cover the spread of 10 points. For more, subscribe to Locked On Bets wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the world's largest car sharing marketplace with Turo on it from a community of local hosts across the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. Forget boring rentals and find your drive at Turo.com. Did you know that driving under the influence of marijuana is illegal? The New York Football Giants got the big win in Washington, and now they control their playoff destiny. A victory in Minnesota would help the Giants' playoff push and could help return their momentum from early in the season. The Vikings are an 11-win team that seems to be one of the more contrasting units in the NFL. Their offense is dynamic and capable of overcoming 30-point second-half deficits, as proven in Week 15 right against those Colts. But it is that horrendous defensive unit that helped to put Minnesota in that hole. If winning football is about balance, the Vikings have been bucking that trend all year long. Patricia Trania from Locked On Giants and Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings preview this NFC bout for us.
You may have the honor of going first. Right now, the line at BetOnline is Vikings -4. Over-under is 47.5. So that implies like a 23-27 kind of game. Or a little bit less than that, I guess. Like a 26-22, I think is what that actually is. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think I would go with the under. The Giants offense just can't score. They basically, I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look, but they haven't scored over 25 points very often this season. The Vikings offense obviously can explode. I mean, as evidenced by that great comeback that they had last week, which was quite something, by the way. I'm going to go with the Giants on this one. I know that, the stadium up there gets really loud. It can be a problem for visiting teams. But look, the Giants are so close to a playoff berth. They win, and then they should be able to get some help from the other 3 teams that I mentioned. They only need 2 of the 3, I think, to lose their games. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the Commanders have the 49ers. And I think I want to say Seattle has Kansas City, and I think the Lions have Carolina. So you would think that there would be 2 losses amongst those 3 that should help the Giants get in. But they're so close to their goal
Yeah, you got 3 weeks
getting
too.
postseason. So I'm going to go Giants, but I'm going to say, gosh, I hate picking scores because I never get them right. I come close, but I never get them right.
It's yeah.
I'm going to say the Giants cover the spread. How about that? Do I have to give a score?
Right. Well, you have a Giants win and you have the under.
I had the under, and I think the Giants
score.
will. I think the Giants, I think the Vikings will not cover the spread. Let's put it that way. I think it'll be a little closer.
So I am going the opposite way here because I as much as Darius Slayton has progressed in all the stories and Isaiah Hodgins and all of that stuff, I think the Vikings defense may have figured out a way as long as you don't have stud receivers. And this is not the team that's going to present that challenge. So I'm going to go with the Vikings win. Over-under is a little bit tough because the Vikings have hit their overs a lot this year because that defense has been so bad and they've let people in. Here's what I tell every fan base. If this game starts out catastrophically for you, if you couple drives, you're down 14-0, bad first quarter, that kind of thing, don't turn that dial because anything can happen in a Vikings game. They let the Bears come back from 21-3 earlier in the season. And by the way, just because you mentioned it, I did look up the Giants season here. They haven't scored more than 24 points once this season, and that was the London game against the Packers. Otherwise 24, which was 27. That's the most. Mm-hmm. So yeah, struggling offense. If the Vikings have figured out their defense with this man coverage thing, I think that can work. I'll still take the over just because of precedent. I'll give it one more game of this man coverage thing before I fully buy into it. But also because of the problems in that Giants secondary and Justin Jefferson and Thielen and Osborne, it just feels like the way that these Giants are built, I just like the way they match up with my Vikings. And, Kayvon Thibodeau coming off the edge is going to be the hardest thing for him. And so that's going to take him out of where he's most used to being. And like for the Giants to find a way to win, they're going to have to work a little bit harder than they would against teams that are structured differently. Like, teams with problems at tackle, but a good interior, teams, with maybe a good running game but less of, good outside receivers, that kind of thing. The Vikings run game has struggled a lot though. So the problems you've mentioned in run defense, they might not come to fruition. So that I think might be one thing that does favor the Giants, but I'm going to say over. Vikings win, Vikings cover. I'll just go fully opposite and we'll see how it plays out.
Absolutely. I mean, they're coming off of a big historic comeback from behind win. And let me ask you something before we wrap up the show. How have they responded in the days after that? Are they still riding that euphoria, or are they, have they put their nose to the grindstone? Because the Vikings, even though they're in the playoffs, they have an opportunity to make ground on the Eagles, or to at least stay pace with the Eagles for that number one seed.
Hurt. If Hurts is hurt, yeah. They kind of learned this lesson when they beat the Bills. That Bills game, you might remember, the crazy game. That was the emotional high. They were riding that for like 3 days, came out totally flat, and got absolutely shellacked by the Cowboys, 40-3 the next week. This one, the feeling is different. It was euphoria in the locker room after the Bills. It was this sort of disbelief, this surrealness. People who covered the Minneapolis Miracle said it felt like the locker room after that. We were like, oh my God, how did we get away with that? And just this total ecstatic thing. This one was more emotional. It was just like the vibe was, we all just believe in each other so much. And you had guys getting choked up in the locker room afterwards. It was a little bit more subdued. And it was more about like, gosh, look at this special group. I love you guys so much. And it was like bringing everybody together. I don't know if that means a worse or a better hangover, but it certainly is different. But hopefully they've learned that sort of emotional hangover lesson the last time they won a completely insane game that everybody's going to talk about for years.
BetOnline has the coverage of the lines ahead of this matchup.
This is BetOnline All Access. It's the Giants and Vikings on Christmas Eve. Here's Drew Butler, Anthony Becht, and Jonathan Casillas.
Minnesota coming off an unbelievable comeback victory. They're a 3-point favorite this weekend, Anthony.
Yeah, I think the Vikings right now are living on 9 lives. I really believe that this may be their time this week. Giants are scrappy and they're going. I actually like a little money line here on the Giants in this game.
Yeah, look, the Giants they're emerging right now, and I think they're going to use that momentum that they have and ride the coattails of that defensive line led by Kayvon Thibodeau, and they go ahead and not only take the points, but I think they can win this game outright.
How can Minnesota bounce back after that emotional roller coaster last week? I think the Giants are more desperate for playoff hopes, so take the G-Men +3.
Thanks, guys. Get Giants, Vikings, and all of your NFL action at BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Nothing screams NFL football like a divisional battle in Week 16. The Eagles have lost just one game all year, so Philadelphia may look to balance competition and rest as they prepare for a deep playoff run. Jalen Hurts is nursing minor injuries, but this could be a symbolic game, sending a message of how dominant they can be. The Cowboys, on the other hand, are coming off a loss to the Jaguars and once again have that cloud of underachievement hanging over their heads. A big holiday win would cement the top wildcard spot and hopefully get Dak Prescott back a confident footing. Louis DiBiase from Locked On Eagles and Marcus Mosher from Locked On Cowboys break down this NFC East battle.
All right, Gino, prediction time. Who do you got winning this game and why? We're just getting right into it.
I think Dallas wins. I think even if Jalen does play, it's going to be a tough task. I always think beating a team twice, especially in this division, is one of the toughest things to do in all of football. With the way that Dallas has been able to run the ball, I think Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard will both have success in that area. I think they'll take their shots downfield and get a couple chances on Bradbury and Slay. I think a lot of points are going to be scored as well. I think both teams are going to really open up their playbook and try to have some fun with this one. I think 34-28 Dallas could be the score of this one. And Gardner Minshew, I think he's going to play the game of his life simply because there's a lot of off-the-field stuff that really makes this one a storybook thing. And Mike Leach, who was, let's say, the guy who made Gardner what he was, passed away less than a week ago, and he was just speaking at his funeral. So what a cool opportunity for Gardner to go out in this game. And I think everybody involved is going to enjoy the performance that Gardner puts on. So above everything else, that element of this game will be very fun to watch along with.
There's also some things going against the Eagles in this game. It's hard to win on the road. It's really hard to win 3 straight games on the road.
Absolutely.
And that's what the Eagles would have to do here. And just by the way the schedule worked out and the way that the Cowboys seeding is probably going to work out, this is going to be likely the last home game of the year for Dallas, which sounds kind of crazy, right? Like we still have a lot of football left, and this is going to be the last home game. I think Dallas, the crowd's going to be loud. I think they're going to be into it. I think Dak, especially after the way the game ended last week, they want to move on. They want to show on a national stage that we're a good team that can go into the playoffs and make some noise. I just have a lot of questions about this defense right now. They've not looked great over the last month of the season. And I even think somebody like Minshew, who's not afraid to take chances, and he's not afraid of standing in the pocket and delivering the ball. I get some Jeff Garcia Christmas Day vibes against the Cowboys. You remember that Jeff Garcia game? I think. Let
me tell you something. Do I remember Jeff Garcia? The first game I ever saw as an Eagles fan in Lincoln Financial Field was against the Tennessee Titans, where Donovan McNabb tore his ACL, and I saw Jeff Garcia and that run begin that year. And man, how can I forget that? That's one of the all-time games, and that's a great point. I think it has very similar vibes.
He beat the Cowboys in a really ugly game. I think it was in 2006 against Tony Romo, who was a young star in the league at the time. I wouldn't be surprised if we get something similar to that. I have a hard time picking this game. I really do, just because there's so much uncertainty on both sides. I will pick the Eagles to win in a slight upset. Let's go 24-20 on 2 A.J. Brown touchdowns down the field.
Goodness. Okay, so a little bit lower scoring. I tried to stay within Dallas covering, I think, 5.5 points right now with Gardner Minshew.
That's too high. I don't even care if it's Gardner. It's too high.
It is too high. I think they're going to cover at the end of the day. I like to reverse jinx them. I think they do cover. And I think they have a better chance than most people do think. But at the end of the day, this is going to come down to who dominates the trenches. I think who has a better run game. And if the Eagles want to pull out a recipe from some of the games where they had struggled, You have to dominate time of possession. You have to keep the ball out of the hands of Dak Prescott and that offense.
Because he'll eventually
especially
figure it
without
out.
Jalen
He'll
Hurts.
figure
exactly. It's an inevitability. I mean, if it takes you 2.5 to 3 quarters for Dallas to get going, they're a team that could score 2 or 3 drives in a row. And then all of a sudden you're saying, oh, where did that first half go? We lost all those opportunities. And now we're sitting here in the second half with our tail between our legs.
Should be a fun one. It's not. It doesn't have the implications that I was hoping for like 2 weeks ago. I was really hoping that this game would be like the one to decide the division.
We all were.
And it was Hurts and Dak. Not the case. Still should be a fun game. It's Cowboys Eagles. It's no matter what the records are, no matter who's playing at quarterback, it's going to be fun. That is it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Eagles and Locked On Cowboys your first listen today. Now make your second listen, the Locked On Sports Today podcast. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All the same places that you would get the Locked On Eagles, Locked On Cowboys podcast. Go check out Gino's show. Him and Louie do a fantastic job covering the Eagles over there. You can follow my co-host, Landon McCool. Gino, enjoy the game. I hope we get to talk soon. I would do one more of these shows later in the year. That would be a blast.
I think every football fan, anybody that's a fan of this league, anybody that's a fan of big viewership numbers should be hoping for that grudge match in the playoffs. I think everybody would want to see it. I always say the league is better when the NFC East is as good as it currently is now. This is going to be a record-setting year for the division as a whole. They're going to surpass any win total numbers that they have had for the past 5 years, and it all comes at the hands of all of these teams figuring it out when it comes down to player personnel, figuring it out when it comes down to executing on the football field. And it makes our job here at Locked On NFL a whole lot better when we get to talk about these teams like this.
BetOnline has the coverage of the lines ahead of this matchup.
Welcome to BetOnline All Access. It's the Eagles and Cowboys on Christmas Eve. Here's Drew Butler, Anthony Becht, and Jonathan Casillas.
Big news coming out of Philly with Jalen Hurts dealing with an injury. The Eagles head to Dallas this weekend. Anthony, the Cowboys are 6-point favorites.
Yeah, I don't think Jalen's going to play. I think Gardner Minshew is a respectable backup who can handle a lot of the weapons around him. So, listen, I like the underdog in this one. I'm going to take those points in the Eagles.
Yeah, I think the Eagles are going to prove Micah Parsons right. That is not just Jalen Hurts. It is the team because they are a better team than the Cowboys. So I'll take the Eagles outright to win this game.
Yeah, Philly's 13-1. With a win this weekend, they wrap up the NFC East and they become the number 1 seed in the NFC. Take those 6 points with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Thanks, guys. Get Eagles, Cowboys, and so much more on our full episode of All Access at BetOnline's YouTube channel. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball and soccer, we've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
What's up? Oh, I'm just compiling all the top sports scores, news, and odds so I can make the very best picks.
Me too. BetOnline.net.
Get into the action anytime, anywhere at BetOnline.net.
Tom Brady's track record need not be questioned. He is the GOAT. Enough said, right? But the veteran quarterback is coming off a brutal performance in Week 15 and is currently helming a 6-8 team, though they are leading the NFC South. If making the playoffs is all that matters, then playing the Arizona Cardinals is the right opponent to aid that endeavor. Arizona has been decimated by injuries all season, embroiled in coach and GM controversy, and the Cards are now simply playing for draft position as the season winds down. David Harrison from Locked On Bucs joins Alex Clancy from Locked On Cardinals to preview this NFC matchup.
Not the most ideal scenarios for both teams where the expectations were when the season started. That's not to say that what's happening with the Cardinals isn't best for the future, and what's happening with the Bucs right now isn't necessarily best for the future. Because, David, I'm going to ask you, before we get to this game, people want to know, this is the thing. You talk about it a lot. I apologize ahead of time. Is Tommy looking for retirement or the Patriots or 49ers next year? Like what's the deal? I know 49ers are outside. Patriots are like, well, one last swan song with Billy B. Is this what it's going to be like? What situation are you witnessing there with Tom?
It's interesting. Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks actually brought up a very good point on the Move the Six podcast this week, that going back to that 49ers loss where they got their butts kicked, and Dre Greenlaw came up to Tom Brady on the field and asked him to autograph the ball he intercepted from Tom, and Tom signed it. And they're kind of just saying, like, the Tom of old would not have done that. That would not have been a thing that Tom Brady would have done. So, a lot of this is kind of like, did he lose his mojo? And a lot of that has to do with like kind of his personal life and everything that went on with his family. And like, there's a million different ways to kind of dissect that. But I think that he is done in Tampa, regardless. Like, one way or another, I think this is his last ride in Tampa. I don't really buy the Patriots thing. The problem with that is I also didn't really buy the whole Dolphins thing. And that rumor kind of started circulating in December of last year. And now here we are in December of this year, and now it's a Patriots rumor. So, I mean, I didn't really buy that, but that turned out to be true. So, I mean, I guess, there's no reason to not think that might be true. I think that if Tom leaves Tampa, which I do think he's going to, but if he plays again, I believe it's either San Francisco or it's Las Vegas with his old offensive coordinator there and Coach McDaniels. I don't think, honestly, New England, like, if New England had a Super Bowl caliber roster, potentially, but you still have the Chiefs there. You still got all kinds of talent. You still got the Chargers who, once again, next year, maybe they'll be healthy and maybe everybody will expect them to reach their potential. But you have the Bengals who are going to have another year to stock up on some weapons and make their unit better. Like, the New England Patriots, I mean, the way I see it, at best, could possibly come in to next season as a top 4 to 10 team in the AFC. And I don't know that adding Tom Brady necessarily changed that. They still have a lot of the same problems on their roster that they had when he left. And I think that's a big reason why he left in the first place, is he was kind of sick of being the guy to carry the entire roster. He wanted to go to a place that already had weapons. Vegas obviously has some weapons when they're healthy. The 49ers obviously have some weapons, and the 49ers have the defense. So I think, to me, the Niners, plus he's always wanted to wear the Niners colors, Joe Montana fan. I believe Niners is the front runner. James Yarko completely disagrees with me and thinks that if he plays next year, it will be for the Buccaneers. So I kind of wish he was here to explain his lunacy, but that's just the kind of the way that I see it right now.
Yeah, and you know what? You say lunacy, I say rational thought. I mean, if he wants to make the playoffs, the easiest division by far to win in the NFC is the NFC South. By far is loosely defined, but I mean, if you're going to the Patriots, you got to play in the cold. 45-year-old and 40-year-old Tom Brady in the cold. I'm not sure it'd be the same. You play Josh Allen twice. You play whatever the Dolphins are twice. You play whatever the Jets are twice. And that's a tough division. Yeah. Even the AFC West, those are two of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL. And the NFC West is nothing to sniff at, but I understand that with the defense and the run game and everything like that. I'm sure we'd have to take a pay cut because they're paying so many people there already. But the best roster to go to is the one he already has, if healthy. And they probably have to draft 3 offensive linemen. Tristan Wirfs, like everybody would have. But yeah, that it's just really interesting because he's not leaving a terrible place. No income tax, state income tax. Like, there are a lot of perks to stay in Florida. But anyways, this is not a Tom Brady podcast, even though it probably should be on the Locked On Podcast Network. Russ Jackson, get it together. In this game Sunday night, it's going to be. It's a very important game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, let's not gloss over that. Like, the Buccaneers have to win this. The rest of the division is 5-9. I think they have tiebreakers over 1, but does Carolina still drive the ship, or because they lost last week they don't? I know one. No,
they both lost. I think Carolina still. If they end up with tied records, I believe Carolina. I mean, they still have to play again, so that'll obviously determine some things as well. But yeah, if Carolina wins out, then they win the South, I believe.
Yeah, so I'm like, this seems to be Tampa Bay Buccaneers win. I mean, I don't think Trace McSorley. It'll be a fun story for the Cardinals. I don't talk about injuries. I don't talk about tanking. Oh, they should lose. Let's sit everybody. That's not how good karmic things happen. That's not how things work. Go win football games. Every single player that's an employee of the NFL is going to try and win every single time, whether it be for this team for next year or for their next contract. But I think this is going to get pretty ugly. Not necessarily saying it's going to be a blowout, but it's not going to be pretty football. And I think that, the Cardinals will probably, I don't see Tampa Bay putting up a 40 burger, but I see, maybe 30-13, 30-17, maybe with a garbage time touchdown at the end. Trace McSorley's got some talent. They've got all their weapons healthy pretty much except for Zach Ertz and all of the offensive line. But I think about 30-17, I think there's going to be more points scored than people expect.
Yeah, I'm going a little bit of a different direction with that. I think it's gonna be a low scoring affair. I just not a whole lot of confidence in that offense. I know that defense in Arizona is not the greatest, and my listeners and viewers would be more than happy to throw that in my face if I'm wrong. Here, the Bucs are favored by 6.5, which is a little bit surprising, but I think that's a lot more to do with what the bookmakers think about the Cardinals than it has to do with the Buccaneers. I do think the Buccaneers are going to get a win. But I think it ends up being 21-17 Tampa Bay. And kind of like you, like maybe not as close as the score says, right? It's probably going to be like 21-10 and then kind of a garbage time, touchdown there towards the end. Maybe D-Hop gets into the end zone or Trace runs it for like 40 yards because somebody overcommitted to something. But I think, yeah, I've got 21-17. It's hard. Going back to last week, against the Bengals, I said in my prediction on BucsGameDay.com, like I've lost my faith in Tom Brady magic at this point. The last time I leaned on it with San Francisco, thinking he's going home. It's a rookie quarterback. It's the perfect Tom Brady game, and he laid an egg. The entire team laid an egg. It's not just on Tom. So this is one of those games where you would expect this team, but again, trying to avoid the looking for a turnaround point because I think that's part of the problem with what's happening in Tampa right now. It's hard for me to predict a much larger victory than 4 points or so. Would be happy to be wrong. I was happy at halftime, thinking like, oh, okay, I was wrong about this game. That's good. Unfortunately, I ended up being right. So hopefully a little bit more correct on this one, but a close win for Tampa. And not a must win, but a definitely need to win. I think this is the best way I can put it.
Once again from Locked On Bets, here's Lee Sterling.
This is Lee Sterling from Locked On Bets and Paramount Sports with your BetOnline prediction for the game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers laying the 6.5 points playing at the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Tampa Bay, their last game against the Cincinnati Bengals, everything looked great at half, up 17-3. And then all of a sudden, Joe Burrow caught fire, and the Cincinnati Bengals, who are clearly one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the NFL, ended up beating the Bucs 34-23. Now, Tampa Bay gets to face the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona, no Kyler Murray. He's out with a knee injury. Backup quarterback, Colt McCoy, he's probably going to miss the game with a concussion. Looks like third-string quarterback Trace McSorley will get the start. When you have to start a third-string quarterback in the NFL, usually mean problems. McSorley tries hard, but he's a journeyman and he's limited throwing the football here. Also, the offensive line coach, Arizona Cardinals, fired a couple games ago. Their general manager is out with health concerns. And then also, looks like Tom Brady could have a big game. Arizona has a 25th rated pass defense here. So Arizona head coach Cliff Kingsbury, he's in a world of problems right now. Tom Brady, I think he'll light up Arizona here. Sometimes you got to lay it, even if you want to play it on the road. Tampa Bay wins easy, 38-14 over the Arizona Cardinals. For more, subscribe to Locked On Bets wherever you get your podcasts.
We told you last week that the Chargers had the schedule in place to push them into the playoff picture, and LA is poised to do just that. Sitting in the 6th seed and riding a 2-game winning streak, the Chargers are getting healthy and potentially dangerous at the right time. The Colts, however, are not. Indy has played musical chairs at quarterback and will once again send Matt Ryan to the bench in Week 16. It's hard to tell if this was simply an odd year for the organization with injuries and a less than stellar offensive unit, or possibly a run of bad luck fueled by ill-informed decisions. Daniel Wade from Locked On Chargers joins Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks from Locked On Colts for the Monday night coverage.
All right, David, I have learned to not trust these Colts when making these predictions. I have learned that they can have a 33-point lead going into the second half and lose. I'm intrigued to see what you think about how this game could transpire.
Yeah, so looking at this game for the Chargers, I mean, obviously these two teams are going in opposite directions. Hopefully the Chargers are steaming forward towards the playoffs. But like I said in the beginning, they got to handle their business, and that includes the Colts on Monday night. I think, the Chargers are very familiar with the Colts defensive coordinator, Gus Bradley, as, he was the defensive coordinator for the Chargers for many years. We know he plays a cover 3, and so they're going to try to limit those explosive pass plays down the football field. So it's all about dicing up those soft spots in the zone, which there will be. So Justin Herbert's going to have to be patient. I think in this game, I don't know if the Colts are going to be able to establish any kind of running game. I think that's going to be very difficult for them. And I think if the Chargers get up, it could really turn into an ugly contest. So I do feel like the passing attack for the Chargers is going to be a little too much to keep up with. So I'm going to go with the Chargers winning this game 34-24.
All right. I've also got the Chargers in this one, but I think with Nick Foles being in there, I have a little more faith in the offense just because the downfield passing attack is something they have sorely missed all season. And if the offense can sustain a little bit, that means that the defense won't get so gassed. And so when the defense is playing well, they can shut down just about anyone. They held the Chiefs down low. They wound up beating them. I have it as 20-17 Chargers. In the end, they're just a little too much. Justin Herbert, the social media quarterback, which I'm sure you're tired of hearing by now.
Such a fallacy. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I believe in that social media quarterback and his ability to beat the Colts, which he'll just be a little too much. The Colts are missing some important pieces. Kenny Moore, we don't know if he'll be back, although Julian Blackmon's been playing good football. Jonathan Taylor, that just eliminates such a huge explosive part of the offense.
Yeah.
20-17 Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see an avenue where that happens because the Chargers play a ton of one-score games, and they really have only won by 10 points one time this season, and then that was against the Houston Texans. And so I think that's probably a little bit closer to where it could actually end up being. And that's why, it's really hard to predict with this team because even going into the games where they should be favored, you just never know which Chargers team is going to show up. The offensive inconsistencies of this team has really been their biggest issue. They've really, really had trouble, especially in the third quarter of games. They haven't scored a third quarter touchdown since week 5 of this NFL season, which has been just unbelievably abysmal. It's it's hard to fathom that they've had that much issue with the amount of offense. Now, again, they've had a lot of injuries, especially with their offensive line and their skill position players. So, but now they're healthy. So that excuse goes out the window. So they have to put scoring drives together in the third quarter. They have to be just more consistent. With this offense, they should be scoring points left and right. And we just have not seen it this year. So until they get a little bit more consistent on the offensive side of the ball, a 20-17 score is very, very reasonable.
Yeah, sometimes those streaks just kind of defy logic. Like the Colts went the longest time without being able to score a point, field goals included in the first quarter. They finally have kind of broken out of that, but it was just a really weird slump that they were in. So you guys, we're looking forward to a couple big things in this one. Obviously, Nick Foles is the Colts' new quarterback. For the Chargers, they've got to take care of business and just beat a team they're supposed to and look like the Chargers are supposed to. Secure that playoff spot and go into the tournament looking good. As for matchups, there's a ton of them to look at. All over the field. It just really depends on either side what they're able to do. Will the Colts hold things steady? Will their passing game get to be open? The Chargers hold a lot of advantages in this one, so we will see for sure.
Catch your breath if you can, because following the high-intensity games in Week 16, the intensity will only ratchet up from here. Each and every week, we'll continue to bring you all of the insight and analysis from across our Locked On network. Thank you so much for joining us this week. I'm Jordan Black, and this has been NFL Key Predictions.